Hello and welcome to Raising Anchor, your podcast and source for all things Rhode Island FC. I'm your host, Matt Entrican, coming to you on Thursday, August 15th. Already, almost all the way through the month already. Doesn't even feel like it. RIFC proves that better soccer lives in the Ocean State after a 3-0 Derby beatdown against Hartford Athletic that saw fireworks on the pitch and off the pitch. We're going to relive the biggest moments of El Clamico and bring you up to speed on who's joining RIFC and maybe who's departing this season as we get you ready for the game ahead against the Oakland Roots. But to get that all covered and oh so much more, the one and only co-host with the most, Jason Perry. Jason, how is it going, my friend?
Great. Riding on the high off that wind still. Love me a good summer thunderstorm. We got a lot to get into, so I'm just going to go right into it. The USMNT got a coach.
Greg Berhalter was found to be the most excellent choice for a third time running, right?
Somehow we got Mauricio Pochettino.
The good old Poach. I'm sure there's a lot of fans on both sides of the pond that like that. I know we don't have a lot of time to cover that tonight. And maybe if we ever get a episode sub 130, maybe we can talk about the benefits of that. I hope no matter what, like at this point, fans just have to know the die has been cast. That is your leader going into 2026's World Cup. And long may his reign, get us through at least maybe the quarterfinals. I don't know. Is that possible? I don't know.
Maybe. People are already making jokes about hashtag Pochettino out. This is hashtag not a USMNT pod. So maybe we'll, like you said, circle back to this later if we have some more thoughts, but we got a lot to unpack from this last week.
Yeah. So speaking, and we don't we're going to get to the game like mid-week or mid recording here tonight. We got some stuff to talk about around the Super League. So the Super League starts. USL's Division I soccer program starts this weekend in their inaugural season. We threw out a tweet earlier this week about, we've heard rumblings. We've talked directly with Brett Johnson as well as the front office staff about the likelihood of us getting a USL Super League team in the near future. Right now, they've said 2025 is definitely off the table because they need to get the Tidewater launch perfect. But there's a really good chance that we'll be seeing some USL Super action in the potential near future. I was looking at the teams today because I was hoping that the names that they would come up with would not disappoint. And for those of you following along on the video, some of them are incredible. Some are safe, but some are incredible. So you've got Brooklyn FC, which is interesting because they're also joining the championship next year. So they're kickstarting. I mean, talk about like a Herculean effort. They're both starting a women's team, which they're fielding first. I don't know if that's ever been done in the history of professional soccer, right? Like usually the women's team follows the men's or there's like a loose association between them. This may be a record. And that's simply incredible for the women's game. You've got Carolina Ascent FC. Love that name.
I love the colors and the logo they got going on there. That's really clean looking.
Dallas Trinity FC. Okay. I need to learn more about what that is. DC Power FC. That just screams corporate, capitalistic, governmental interference and greed. I love it. Fort Lauderdale United FC. You're in strikers territory. There's a rich pedigree there. There's a certain broadcaster from La Liga that would be kind of like rolling his eyes at that, I imagine. Lexington SC, which we'll talk about in just a second. They've got some news. The Tampa Bay Sun FC and then Spokane Zephyr FC. Love the name. Hate where they're at. If you look at the geography of this club, they're out in no man's land. So the traveling for them is going to be insane in this first year of the league. But then I guess also that's kind of like you flip the coin and teams are going to have to travel all the way out to them. So maybe it'll be like Fortress Zephyr. I don't really know what's going on. But anyways, like we said, there are plans, at least in ideation. They've not been committed to yet, but there are plans to potentially bring a USL Super League team here to Rhode Island, specifically at Tidewater. And if you were paying attention to some of those recent articles, both in the club and outside the club about the development of Tidewater, they've been making some lofty commitments and goals around like how they plan on kind of keeping that stadium open 24/7, 365. I think there was something listed as many as 200 events a year inside the facility, and having another soccer team that is Rhode Island FC adjacent, specific, or owned by the same entity, that goes a long way to getting that stadium filled with events.
Yeah, seems like they gonna not just Rhode Island, but a lot of clubs are trying to find different events, different teams, different ways that they can kind of capitalize on these grounds to bring in that revenue flow. So not only not to bring this up, but if people look at some other stadiums, they're not cheap either.
No, I mean, we have the record right now for most expensive. But in the spirit of that, we did throw out the tweet in celebration of the Super League kicking off, and we asked ourselves, if we were to start a team right now, what would we name it? I threw out some easy ones, which were like pre-existing names for the men's side. So I threw out like our Rhode Island Riptide, Rhode Island Anchors. I wanted to put out Rhode Island Pirate Queens, but I wasn't sure how that would land, especially just in word form. So I got to ask you, what is a name that if you could choose right now the identity of this team, what would you name it?
Riptide sounds kind of cool. Maybe something tying in the tides. I mean, some of these other clubs, Lexington, it's basically the same thing. So I don't know if for how they envision this team to is it going to have its own separate identity, or is it going to be an extension of
No idea.
Rhode Island FC?
No idea. All I know is that like I'm all about the Rhode Island Rogues. There's the Providence City FC. Formerly, they were the Rogues as well. Lots of rogue history here. I would love it if they could find a way to come together, and whatever that's a buyout for the naming rights, or they bring the infrastructure in to help support the women's game here. I would love it if it was the Rhode Island Rogues. I think that's a perfect like dovetail into professional soccer at the women's level. But we'll see what happens. And if it is the Rhode Island Pirate or the Ocean, a couple people threw out Ocean State stuff. So like if it's the Ocean State Pirate Queens, I just saying, whatever.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's get into the Lexington Sporting Club, which weird because we already have a sporting team announced for USL Championship and Sporting Jacks. That is not this club. This club, for those of you that are maybe familiar with it or that you feel like you've heard it before, that's because they're just in USL 1, not currently in the championship. Lexington Sporting Club announced that they are promoting themselves to the championship while in the middle of a very lackluster season, if I'm being honest. They're at the bottom of USL 1 right now, and I don't know, but this feels kind of like it's a sneakily familiar deal that like North Carolina did, where they promoted themselves. They had a contract clause where they relegated themselves and said, hey, we're going to get our act together and then lift ourselves back up. This seems akin to that in some sort of deal that maybe had been negotiated way back in the day, maybe just a year ago, who knows. But this doesn't, I don't know. Walk us through, like, does this look promising for you?
It's interesting. They are outspending some clubs in the championship. So maybe everything just didn't pan out, is not going their way. I've heard that the new stadium is a significantly better location, and that the current one is a little out of the ways. So there is the potential, if you tie in the fact that there is a Super League coming, a Super League team as well. I mean, there's potential there for them to have somewhat of a breakout like coming up year. But that press release didn't look too promising.
That photo was empty it was devoid of people who wanted to pay attention to that exciting news.
It's funny in the idea of just, promoting yourself without kind of doing it through merit in some ways. We keep talking about ProRel. We don't know if this is ever something that's actually going to happen.
I mean, Brett Johnson said on a podcast that USL is only going to thrive if ProRel happens. So yeah, we know where he stands. We know where the club stands.
It feels like the fans of the USL are going to manifest it. I don't know if it's going to be the way that we want it to. Is this the ProRel we want, or is this the ProRel we deserve?
I don't know. All I can say is that like I saw the number, and I'm glad you brought up that Lexington is currently outspending some of the bottom teams in USL Championship today, but like that's not really fair to say. Like when you're outspending Monterey Bay, who is put together with like $27 and a pack of gum, like Miami FC is just using Italian like loaned monopoly dollars from AC Milan. It's just really not fair to say that they're already overspending, especially when with what they are spending, they are going to have less performance because they're in last place in USL 1. For this club to make the jump, I mean, we felt how difficult it is. We've watched North Carolina FC make the adjustment this year. I feel like and North Carolina won USL 1 last year, right? So like I feel like there's going to be a massive overhaul needed for Lexington. It's not just the stadium, it's going to be the entire player infrastructure. So best of luck to them, I guess. We will be seeing them then next year, which begs the question, and this is where things get a little bit spicy because there's this sweetheart moment going on in the league right now where everyone's like, oh, congratulations, welcome back to the family, we've missed you. Congratulations. But while everyone's questioning like the feasibility of it, the competitiveness, the payroll, I'm looking at the displacement here, because when one team enters, one team must leave. It's like the Thunderdome, right? And with both Brooklyn FC starting next year and Lexington now joining, the East is suffering from some oversaturation. And it was the same thing we saw this year with the addition of ourselves and North Carolina coming back in. That kicked Memphis out the door into the Western Conference. We have to do this whole thing again. And I mean, I'm not an expert, but when you look at the map, who else is going to join along with Memphis to the Western Conference? I'll ask you before I show it. I mean, you've seen the notes, so you know, but like, if you hadn't seen this, what would you have guessed?
Honestly, I have no idea. I would I know I've seen John Morrissey's map of like what west, south, and north, and that's kind of wild. But hey, let's.
But so for those of you watching on the screen, it's like one of those like silly cartoon maps where we draw the border and then we just wrap it around Birmingham Legion. Birmingham's got to go.
Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah,
it's a West Coast state, right?
Of course, yeah. It's part of the Western Triumvirate. I mean, this is a big problem, right? There's obviously some Eastern Conference, like I said, saturation. The problem though becomes as we continue to build more teams, that's not going away. Like when you look at the projects that are coming up and proposed, you got Buffalo, you've got Roswell, Georgia, you've got all these other teams. It doesn't really feel like this is a fair stick to Birmingham. It's kind of interesting because we asked Kaylor Hodges for like a wellness check, how is he doing on this? And his hopes are that Miami FC goes away so that they can return to the Western Conference. But there's some real problems with the way this is. There's just not enough teams in that West Coast. We've heard the rumors that Reno may return and some other clubs that may be in development. But when you look at what's really tangible right here, and this is where for 2025, this is it. Like this is set in stone. There's no way they get around this. You don't move Indy, even though you could say like, well, they're right on the line. Indy benefits from the derby with Louisville, and now with Lexington, there's like this like trio of hostile territories. Right. The only reason you would keep Birmingham, if anything, is if Indy actually got an MLS bid. So, but they're not playing that long game. They're not playing chess instead of checkers. When you look at 2026, this is where things get really interesting because this is where those rest of those teams can catch up to us and join the USL Championship. So, in addition to the teams we already mentioned, you've got Sporting Jacks coming online. You've also got the return of Oklahoma City Energy, which they've gotten their field whole thing worked out. So they're back in the running.
Company.
Exactly. And then you've really only got the two USL expansion teams that are showing merit right now. I know there's a couple others that have been listed, but they've kind of gone cold and dark. So Des Moines is struggling for the stadium environment problems that they're having. They lost some of their bids on the development plan that they wanted to do. NOLA, New Orleans, has gone completely dark. Like they're not posting anything. There's been no news out of that. There's been conversations that some of the quote unquote ownership group has lost the will to do this project. So you've really only got Northwest Arkansas, which announced their kit reveal today, or not kit reveal, but their sponsor, I should say. And then you've got the Milwaukee project. The Milwaukee project is still moving forward. There's still conversations actively being had. So when you look at that, there is a possibility to split these conferences right down the middle and create a central conference. I don't know that we'll get as much as Morrissey's like north, south, east, and west. I don't think we're there from a saturation perspective, but the likelihood of something happening falls really well into kind of what you see on the screen here. So this central conference, for those of you that are only listening along, would consist of Tulsa, Oklahoma City Energy, Memphis 901, Birmingham, all three of the like that area of Indy 11, Louisville City, and Lexington Sporting, and then Milwaukee and Detroit City. And I think that sets up some really good derby action as well. Birmingham would then kind of have to start looking at Memphis as their like resident bad guy. But I think this could work if all of these teams actually get online. What are your thoughts on this?
Call it the mid conference, just for the memes. Don't we have some other? Like, was Boise, Idaho supposed to have a team or something too?
Boise's the one that just needs to happen. Like there is no representation in the Northwest, and you can say MLS already kind of beat everyone to it with the Seattle and Portland projects, but like Idaho completely devoid, Nevada completely devoid. So you get a Reno team in there, you get a Boise team. Let's get Boise to USL, baby. Let's go. That's what needs to happen. You can call them like the Spud Nuts, just really have fun with it. Anyways. The only last thing I would say is we spoke with Jeremy Alba. I always get his name wrong. Allenbaugh. He's the president of USL Championship right now during a recent league press event. And while he didn't confirm that those other projects that I mentioned, like Des Moines and NOLA, were dead, he didn't also kind of say anything else about it. The only other ones that really have traction beyond 2026 right now are Roswell and Buffalo, but that's years down the road. So we got to focus on the here and now. So let's move on. For one thing to happen, we move on to the next. You want to talk a little controversy?
Yeah, let's do it.
You want to talk a little
What happened?
Little donut gate?
Is that like Stargate, where it transports you to a world made of donuts?
Only if you can fit through the donut hole. That's the only way in. So you got to figure that out first. That's like quantum physics. It's so silly that we even have to bring this up, but it caused enough of a fire earlier this week that it just needs to be addressed. So for the uninitiated that stumbled into it, then immediately backed out, we just want to set the record straight because no one ever clarified. Everyone just kept throwing insults. Everyone just kept throwing shade. Everyone just kept throwing hate at each other. And it's important, I think, for the development of the relationship between these two clubs that someone's brave enough, and we're the ones that are going to be brave
enough.
Stand
the olive branch, as they say.
I wouldn't say olive branch. It's just more like setting the record straight. When other journalists had the opportunity and said nothing, I want to reinforce that, said nothing. They just leaned into the chaos. So here's what happened. Here's the timeline of events. Defiance 1636 kickstarted all of this when they threw some shade with a banner that may or may not have been targeted at the Revolution, or maybe specifically a couple of supporters groups, or maybe specifically just one supporters group.
Maybe all of the above.
We don't know. That part is not confirmable. But the banner read, "You'll never see this in Foxborough." On Monday, Coach Cano brings in donuts for the team to celebrate the clean sheet that they had against Hartford Athletic, something that proved to kind of be a tradition that he's had long since. I mean, we've already seen a couple of donuts this year. We don't have a lot of clean sheets, but when we have, he's brought in donuts every time. But it was discovered that he had been bringing them in at his time at Birmingham Legion as an assistant coach. And it's more than likely that may have been something he gleaned from his time as a Revolution player. Now, Rhode Island FC goes on to post a social post of it, and it says "Better Donuts." Here's where things get completely we missed the turn. The "better donut" insult was to Hartford. For those of you not paying attention, better was referencing better beaches, better soccer, better seafood, better fans, better stadium, all of those things. So it was just a continuation of that jab since we had beaten them on the weekend in El Clamico. Someone, and I won't even give the name out, everyone that listens to this podcast knows who it was, but I'm not going to give that person an audience or extra clicks, goes and says that this was a shot fired across the bow of Revolution fans. Revs fans know that this donut thing is a real thing for clean sheets, and the two sides just start yelling at each other. Rhode Island FC is we don't care about you, but we're better than you. And Revs fans are you're just Revs light, and you're just copying everything we do. And then the banter kept getting increased by the journalist who kept trying to antagonize for penetration and audience review.
Gotta get them clicks, likes, subscribes.
The reality is this. It was an independent journalist who alluded, got it wrong, completely wrong, never apologized, never called it back. And the 17 trolls that exist within both communities went after each other, and it amplified this for no reason. Is there friction between these two communities? Go ahead.
I don't know. Maybe a little bit.
Is there friction? Sure. But not. It's all done online. It's all superfluous. It's all based. And if it is on the streets,
it's a bunch of people you'll never see in real life. I don't know if any of these people
Some
even
do.
go to games.
Some do. We've seen a few. We've heard that they're there. We've not met a lot of them. But this is not a fan to fan thing that ever has happened. And you can be a fan of both clubs. I cannot stress enough.
Yeah,
and the reason we're even bringing this up is there are probably people on both camps who don't understand the hostility, and they want to be fans of both. So if you listen to this podcast, I just want you to take away from this part, you can be a fan of the Revolution. It's okay. You can be a fan of Rhode Island FC too. And if you like one more than the other, that's fine. And if you're struggling at the Open Cup, maybe just don't pay attention to the game and hope both teams succeed. But there's no place to hate on these two communities. We'll do better outside of game day competition if we all get along. And if the supporters groups want to go after each other, that's the hooliganism side of things. I'm fine with that.
Aren't New Englanders supposed to hate New York?
And Connecticut.
Yeah.
And Connecticut.
Yeah.
So anyways, I get off my soapbox because I don't understand it. Ace the Kangaroo writes in, many people are fans of both clubs, judging from the car magnets I see in the parking lot. I agree. And Tim also loves your Stargate reference, by the way. We're really behind on these comments tonight. So that's just what I want to say. Okay. Do you have anything else that you need to add in?
I'll just say this, food-based performance incentives are as old as time. It's politics, gaining in influence and power over people. Like, you can't claim that you invented something that's been happening since the dawn of time.
What I'm hearing is, if I do a really good job at my job, I'll get a pizza party. That's all I heard right there. All right, moving on. You want the good news or you want the bad news?
I guess we'll start with the good.
You like saving the bad news for dessert?
I mean, we have
weird.
good news coming up anyway when we're going to talk about this derby. So,
oh, you're trying to sandwich
we'll
it.
Just, okay. We'll sandwich it.
Okay. All right. Well, then we're going to start with the good news, and that is we have a new player, Morris Dugan. Or if you get it wrong, like I did the first time I introduced myself and called him Dugan Morris, which, I'm allowed to make a couple mistakes every year. He joins the squad, and he is just the player that we didn't know we needed. And it's going to be really interesting to see how he kind of shapes up. But we had hinted at it last week. We had kind of gotten a really early sneak peek that someone may have been coming. And then we did some kind of research on what we know is like this existing Pepe Silva number of players that could potentially augment the squad. And but it wasn't confirmed until Friday at practice. But the German-born defender Morris Dugan joins RIFC to become the second loan acquisition in club history and for this season. It's really interesting. We talked to Coach about this. We put the video out, but there was some other stuff that I couldn't put out at the time because he said things that had to remain off the record. But he really couldn't say enough about Morris. He kept focusing on his physicality. He loved to talk about his height, and specifically that he would be the only left-footed center back that we had in the rotation. I didn't realize until he said that was something that was missing from our game. And now I can't unthink about the possibilities of what having a left-footed center back really does start to offer for the defensive shape.
Left-footed center backs are kind of rare,
especially 6'4" left center backs. They're like unicorns. He's primarily been playing with the Loons this season, and that's Minnesota United for the uninitiated. But he's been playing for their reserve side for the primary manner of minutes that he's had this season, with 984 minutes logged in the Next Pro League. He's only had 6 appearances so far in the MLS senior squad. 2 of those were in regular season, both as substitutes. One was 6 minutes, and I think he got a full half in the other one. And he's played the other 4 games, with 2 of them being in Open Cup, where they did get knocked out by the Michigan Stars of, I think that's NASL or NPSL. It's not even USL. And then where he also played in the 2 Leagues Cups games until they got knocked out. So he's seen a wide variety of level of competitive play within his time with Minnesota United, but there seemed to be this decision where it wasn't just making sense to continue to see him. He was doing really well with Next Pro, but he's in that step between, right? He's in that Jack Panayiotou step, which now we're seeing Jack thrive, and he needs to kind of continue to polish his craft at a little bit higher of a competitive level. We've known about Morris, like I said, since I think May. He was one of their potential transfer opportunities. That he had been scouted as far back as the beginning of the season as a potential pickup, but things couldn't happen. My guess was Minnesota was waiting to see how the dust would settle on him as a player, to see if it was someone that they could continuously bring into the reserve side, or if he would need that additional time. The interesting thing with him, and flying under most people's radar, is that Dugan he's an alumni player of another RIFC defender that we have, where he played with this person on the Marshall Thundering Herd. What a great name for a soccer team. And that alumni is one Gabby Alves. So when you think about that for a second, when you really think about that, we have the potential synergy of a pairing of 2 individuals who played 2 to 3 years of their collegiate time together on that left defensive wing of a left fullback and a left center back. The idea that we need Gabby back in the squad as fast as possible now, it's just really tantalizing to kind of see that synergy and find out what we could kind of unlock as a benefit from having those 2 play together. So I'm really excited, but to have that, similar to when we were talking about Lexington, if something comes in, something must, move out. I have to ask you a question. we don't loan a player down from MLS and not give him playing minutes, right? Like he may not get the start this game coming up, maybe next game. It may be like a Harivo, which we'll talk about, ramping him up. But I don't see Morris Dugan not becoming a starter unless he's just really, really bad. And from the first couple minutes, I don't think I've seen that. And in the practice session, he looked really good. So I got to ask you, who's at risk here of losing their job in that back three?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. We wouldn't have gone out and got a player of his caliber if we wanted someone just for some garbage rotation minutes. So I think, unfortunately, Yao is going to be the one who's going to be fighting for his position. It's hard to make a real judgment on Dugan. He only played 10 minutes. Like you said, I think this is going to be one of those things where throughout the next few weeks, we will see him consecutively pick up more and more minutes until all of a sudden he's just starting.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you whether that's true or not. I feel like Yao's the right one. I feel like Stoneman can be the center spine, and then Nadarse moves to the right. What just kind of doesn't feel good about it is like we've all had moments this season where Yao has made us like just hold our breath.
Yeah.
But we've also we've seen some big time moments where he just comes in like a brick wall, a freight train, and just makes like the most incredible tackle or defensive stop. And it seems really unfortunate that if he loses his spot to just someone being better, like yes, that makes the team better. That's what we want. That's what we need collectively. But you almost feel like I want you to be bad. I want you to do something really egregious so that I can be upset enough that I want you to be benched, knowing that the guy may lose his spot. I mean, I got to have my first conversation with him last week. He's an incredible human being. And knowing that his spot is at risk, and he's second in most minutes contributed to the team. Like, it's just really weird to see if this isn't outside of the rotation and like maybe one defender a week kind of just gets sub, which I don't know you want that much chop and change. Like, you hate to see it.
I think there is a reality of the position that we're in this, championship. Let's compare it to England as well, right? This is the quote unquote championship. We're right underneath the big leagues, and we're above the amateur leagues, so to say. So these players who are not quite there, we're probably going to see a lot of these players who will come through and maybe we'll get a good 6 months to a year of them. And we just kind of have to accept the fact and use them in a way like a tool, not to dehumanize them, but like Dugan can be an important part of this squad to help us make a push through the rest of the season to maybe get a champion or a home playoff berth. Whereas Yao can be a player who maybe we continue to hold on to for a few years if he is happy and the coach is happy with him as well too. If he can kind of, get his spot back, as if Dugan has a really good season and then he disappears and, maybe makes a lot of money for Minnesota, or he just starts for them,
Right. And I mean, he's an MLS caliber player, so you don't not play him, right? I mean, it's just, again, it's like someone getting robbed of all of their hard. And it's not even robbed. It's just like, it's the business of soccer, right? I will ask though, there's a great question in here. Do we move to a back four? Is this something where we see the symmetry and the pairing that Alves and Dugan offer? Is that something we go for, or do we keep it where it is? Because like, to me, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. If we need to be more defensive, our 3-back line could kind of be a 5 at times. And I mean, we've even seen where, coach will sub out Turnbull and then, slide Holstad out to the wide position. I mean, there are different things that we can do. Where in those kind of winger positions, you could just play a midfielder. I mean, even we've talked back when we talked to Kaylor Hodges, and we were asking about Joe Brito. He's like, he can kind of fill that wide position too, but you already have wingbacks. So, I mean, if, depending on the way a game is going, if you just need to fill a spot for 10 or 15 minutes, there's plenty of rotation options that this team has.
Right. So, I mean, we're going to need more than 10 minutes also to see him on the field before we can make final decisions, but it looks like that'll be the direction that we go. So you wanted the good first, so now we have to bring up the bad, and the bad is the worst kind of bad possible, and that is one, Isaac Inking is now out for the season. So we learned about it last week. We just couldn't talk about it because, you know, he's sitting there in a compression sleeve. He looked just absolutely distraught, and you knew you didn't even have to ask what the level of injury was. You knew it was going to be bad. Rhode Island FC announced earlier this week that midfielder Isaac Inking had suffered an anterior cruciatus, I like saying cruciatus, ligament tear, an ACL, and will miss the remainder of the 2024 USL Championship season. Inking will undergo surgery with Rhode Island FC's exclusive orthopedic partner, Ortho Rhode Island. So, you know, plug in for there. And he's expected to miss the next 6 to 9 months. So for those of you trying to track injuries, that's not just end of season, that's into next season as well. So that's just a low blow. I mean, you hate to see it happen. You couldn't have asked for it to happen to someone more undeserving. He's such a nice guy. And what's really just like terrible about this whole thing is he seems to like run into the injury bug or the freak injury circumstances. Like, he just is a really unlucky player. He's been hurt with the Revolution at times, which kind of some people theorize it wasn't his game. It was just the fact that he couldn't stay healthy, which didn't see his career go further with the Revs. And then even with us at the beginning of the season, he had a broken jaw, got his jaw broken and missed out. They couldn't even sign him until he was healthy and fit to return. And that was in preseason. So it's like, you want this guy to succeed. You want to have him have every opportunity possible. And it's just one of those things that like it's just not going his way. So we hope that he gets to have the fastest and speediest recovery possible. You hate to see this happen to good people. I will say an interesting story, just kind of behind the scenes. The club was planning to announce this a little later than when they actually did, because they wanted to have all of the correct information and the doctor timelines of what would happen for this player. And then there was a lack of communication, because you're at the sold out derby. The team goes to line up for their team picture, which you just saw on the screen for those of you watching along, and they're holding up the Isaac Inking jersey. Now, you can argue that not everyone's necessarily paying attention. I don't think everyone was in their seats yet, so you could be like, "Oh, what is that?" Maybe it's like a feel better, we can't wait to see you back. And then Grant Stoneman goes and scores his goal, and he runs over to the sideline, goes and retrieves the jersey and holds it back up and shakes it in front of the camera. And at that point, like, the cat's out of the bag. So the communication team is like, what do we do? Like, we weren't going to announce this yet. People were flying onto Twitter asking questions about it. So it kind of got revealed. It's just interesting sometimes how that happens. But it was a very beautiful and touching moment to be able to celebrate for Isaac, who is going to be missed on the season. We need our Flow Bros reunited as fast as possible.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. It's always good though to see the guys wish him well like that. Hopefully he gets well soon, and hopefully his bad luck kind of starts to end off so he can kind of get his career going, you know?
Agreed. All right. It's a CLAMICO derby time. Let's get into it. Oh, actually, no, I have one other piece of good news. So we're going to like re-sandwich this. So it's positive, negative, positive. Happy belated birthday to Nate Silvera and Kevin Vang, our two of our 3 Rhode Island boys. Happy birthday. Just wanted to say that real fast. It's belated by like a couple of days, maybe a week on one of them. I don't even think Kevin Vang is old enough to drink yet. So happy birthday, nevertheless.
Happy birthday, guys.
And if your families are listening, let them know that we said happy birthday. Moving along, let's get into this derby. Action pack. You couldn't have asked for a better result. I'm still riding the high, the buzz that was that 3-0 beatdown. Combine that with the after game celebration where we saw a bunch of new fans. The celebration to start. I'm not trying to make it a thing, but I'm not against it becoming a thing. You can't. It was one of the highs. It was the high of August so far. You can't beat that. It may have been one of the highs of the year. Let's get through this because there was some considerable change when you look at how this lineup kind of got fostered compared to a certain game in Indy. So let's get through how our players lined up.
Yeah, so Rhode Island made 7 changes from their last USL Championship match, their most from one match to another this season, to get players ready for the derby. So you're going to see Vegas in net, or you saw Stoneman, Yao, and Nodarse making up that back 3, with Turnbull, Hostad, Haribo, Quizera, and Fuson in that 5, with Chico and Doyle up top.
I think there's only one, maybe two big surprises on the night here. What kind of stuck out to you in terms of the lineup?
I guess we kind of felt that Haribo was kind of pushing his way into a starting lineup. I just didn't think that maybe the Derby was going to be the game where we were going to see that happen. And then also to see Doyle start over JJ. Maybe just it being a long week and he got beat up a little bit there. They're just kind of give him a few minutes off.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about that either. We didn't even get clarity as to why Doyle was selected. The only thing I can think of is he did score a goal in 4 minutes against the first leg of the Derby, so maybe they wanted to see if Doyle lived rent-free in the back line of Hartford's heads. But yeah, it was an interesting one. Haribo we're going to get into, so I'll skip over that for the time being. Hartford Athletic, on the other hand, incredibly unlucky on the day. When you think about this team having faced us on June 1st earlier this season, there was two players that were really missing from their kind of augmentation, which helped them with the draw at home in Trinity Stadium. One is Jay Chapman was loaned recently to the Charleston Battery, so they were out one midfielder who looked like he had the right weapons and skill sets to kind of make something for the team. But then just kind of on the night, and it happened I think of the day of or the night before, Joey Akpunonu was recalled from FC Cincinnati. So they got the Jack Panayotu treatment on this recall. But the weirdest part is that Joey then gets reloaned that same week. So he doesn't play for Hartford. Hartford loses. He was considerably their best defender. When we had Nathan on, he was speaking to the highs of it was a lot of the game was going to run through Joey. Joey gets reloaned to Huntsville City FC in the MLS Next Pro, where he rides the pine on their first game against Chattanooga FC. But Huntsville isn't even Cincinnati FC's alternate Next Pro team. That's Nashville's team. So something is really rotten in Denmark for Hartford Athletic to lose one of their best caliber players to then get reloaned to Tier 3 or Division 3 soccer and not even have them in your own internal reserve side squad. That, to me, Hartford has some questions that they need to answer. And it did not help them on the night, and it showed because we didn't need the help. We appreciate that help. Thank you, FC Cincinnati. But yeah, that was bad luck for Hartford.
Yeah, that just seems like there's something wrong there in the environment in the team, and maybe they just need to purge everything. Give it a deep cleaning, start afresh,
give it a good old Olympia. So let's get into the game itself. But before we do, the environment, we have to talk about it. It was a sold out crowd. It was honestly, it was one of the most exciting sports moments in New England in the last year, easily, maybe even decade, outside of some Super Bowl wins and maybe a couple of NBA finals. But having said that, Defiance brought a million smokes. I think it was a million, maybe a million plus one. There was a train horn. They brought pyro. They had one of the most creative tifos. If you haven't seen it, you need to go on and check it out. I've not seen something more original.
Things.
Yeah,
really cool.
Yeah, and then on top of that, RFC's well, what if we introduce inflatable soccer ball for the the halftime break? And on top of that, what if someone actually finally wins the crossbar challenge? You can't ask for a better night. I don't think RFC, I think they checked every box they wanted and more. So the only thing I didn't get was I didn't get the parking lot vibes because I had to go straight to work. Walk me through what was the parking lot like?
Yeah, it was a great environment as always. Getting to hang out with everybody. A lot more pop-up tents than usual, but maybe that's just kind of to protect people with a fairer skin and maybe get out of the heat a bit. A lot of pizza strips just in defiance of Connecticut because they were trying to trash on us because they couldn't come up with anything better. It's interesting. We'll kind of get into some more of the, let's say, hooliganism.
Just go right into it.
Happened.
We're running long. Go right into the hooliganism.
But
go.
So we should have known this was going to happen when we're all hanging out in the tailgating area, and then we hear what sounds like fireworks going off in the parking lot, and we're looking around, well, we didn't do that, and we know that Hartford is here now, so I don't know how we didn't connect the dots there to think that maybe something was going to happen, but also, Defiance is not the police. That's someone else's job to kind of monitor that kind of thing.
I just want to know how they snuck. So for those that didn't pay attention or have been living under a rock, the Hartford's response to the sanctions, where they weren't allowed to bring any music or music makers or banners because of some things that happened at the first leg of the derby, they snuck in trash bags. Some people were calling it other things. I will save that for your imagination. But they snuck in green trash bags and inflated them up. They snuck a banner in, but most dangerously, they also snuck a Roman candle. And I don't know where they put that. Like, there are terms that I want to say on this podcast, but we're going to keep it family friendly. You can use your imagination. But they lit a Roman candle at the top of their section, and they tried to do this like false flag thing where the person that did it was also holding a Rhode Island FC flag, so they could say, "Oh, it wasn't us." Like, look, we have all these images. Smithfield police were not having it. Quickly shut it down after a swift response. Then put people up at the top to kind of police it for the rest of the night. Fireworks in an open area is already dangerous. Whether people have PTSD, they have concerns with the noise. It's really selfish to do something like that, but it's also with the actual pyro of it. It's dangerous. You know, you can say no pyro, no party, and all that ultra stuff, but like the reality is, you should never really be doing that in a game. I don't condone it. You can, if you want to see it, you can watch it on like lawless leagues where they all invade the pitch and fight each other and people die. Like, if that's your thing, go do it. My other question though is why in the world would you shoot fireworks off when you're losing 2-0 at that point in the game? Like, what are you trying to say?
I don't know. I mean, you want to see fans still support their team, right? Even if they are losing, you know, and I don't condone their actions at all, right? Putting other people in danger, what they did was stupid. I guess in a sense, it's maybe this shows that they kind of are trying to take this, you know, derby seriously, and maybe this is a rivalry. But there are more creative and less dangerous ways to kind of create that atmosphere. I mean, they've already snuck in their trash bags. They got a banner. Like, they could have, you know, they could sing and chant together as a group and make noise that way. But like, we didn't hear them. So their idea of like, we're just going to set off fireworks and potentially endanger people who are not like ready to stand under fire. It's like, that was just dumb.
Yeah.
You know, I appreciate that while it wasn't as many as we brought out, I appreciate that people came out.
Well, so I want to say something, because just for time, the best part of the whole thing was at the end, the production company that puts on the game, to respond to the crushing defeat that Hartford experienced, they had a very specific song that they wanted to play to celebrate the team's victory, and that was one Katy Perry's "Firework." So for those of you that were paying attention at the end, that was completely intentional. That was not like a random, like you're shopping and you hear that song. So listen, at the end of the day, don't be dumb. It's a lesson learned. I think. What do you think? Is there ramifications behind this now?
Potentially. I've heard that they've had problems with this before in Connecticut because I think their laws are stricter. I just hope that it doesn't diminish this rivalry, right? You want to see fans go in and be able to support their teams. You know, they did not let us bring any noisemakers or whatnot, and we brought the noise just with our own voices.
I didn't hear. So where I sit in the control box, they were closer to me than Defiance, and there were periods where I didn't hear them at all. There were times when I did hear them, but they weren't louder. They were just closer by proximity. But there were other times when I couldn't hear them. I actually looked out the window, and they looked like they were shuffling zombies. They were super quiet. They were super sad. I remember having participated in that game on the away leg. That never happened. If a chant stopped, someone else started screaming something else or just making noise in general. So listen, we got to get into this actual game. It was a crazy night. We went in a single night, by the way. We went from 8th place to 5th place to 7th place to 6th place. We were all over the gauntlet. And it was just a wild night.
Yeah, the point spread in the Eastern Conference right now is very tight. Unless you are a Charleston or Louisville, those playoff spots you can jump easily with one win or one loss. You can fall.
Yeah, so I wanted to put it up on the screen for you guys to follow along. I'm not going to read through all of this, but I want to kind of call out the big stats that jumped out to me. 2.97 XG. Are you kidding me? Of course it's going to happen against Hartford. Of course it is. Highest XG in club history. I would like to know, outside of like a Louisville or Charleston battery stat, I bet you, maybe even Sacktown, I bet you that's the highest XG on record in the East Coast besides those big three teams. But the interesting ones here to kind of focus on and pay attention to, Rhode Island FC are now unbeaten in their last 7 USL Championship matches when leading at halftime. So there's a stat you didn't know. We've got 5 wins and 2 draws, and that dates back to all the way to the Tampa Bay game, our third game ever. We don't like to talk about it, but that was where that kind of reset itself. And then also we've avoided defeat in the last 6 matches when we've scored first. So there's a little bit of a difference there between scoring first and then holding the lead into halftime. But we've avoided defeat in our last 6 matches when we've scored first since the Colorado Springs beatdown that we got by Ronaldo Demus. So I mean, I look at here, like, what stats are jumping out to you? 20 shots to 7. We had almost as many shots on target as they had all night. I have one that I want to kind of call out later. The only one that's kind of coming to my mind is the possession piece. We've talked that this team needs to be anti-possession, 100% counter and transition. We saw every time the number drops, that needle goes down in our favor. We tend to do better. And this seemed like another example on the night for us. What kind of highlights were you thinking through as you looked at these stats?
Yeah, I agree. I know that Coach Kano wants the team to have more possession. It's just, I think that there are times where they still struggle to kind of know what to do with that ball. And as you know, for those listening who can't see this, even when we don't have the possession, we're still able to keep that kind of the ball, the field tilt, as they say, away from our own net. So even if we don't have the ball, the way that this team presses, the ball was only ever in our own third 25% of the match, where we kept it in the middle and we kept it in their third. Yeah. So I don't think possession is a necessity for us as long as we continue to be able to keep that press up. If that starts to fail us, then you might want to take that pressure off of the defense. And that's where you can say, hey, let's just possess the ball for a while, try and pass it around, make them chase shadows, just to give them a break.
So I've only got 2 questions to kind of summarize this. One, we had warned, or we had alluded, that Joshua Encarnacion would potentially be a hindrance on the night, just given his track record for us against Charleston Battery. What did you take away from his performance on the night?
Ultimately, it didn't seem to be an issue. This was a physical game, though. There's 44 tackles combined from the 2 teams, 25 for RIFC, 19 for Hartford. Combine that with 6 yellows. We were worried about him, but there's nothing for me to really nitpick here. I'd say overall, I think it was a fine game.
I would actually agree with that. In fact, there were a couple times when players from Hartford's side would flop in the box, and I was like, "Oh God, here we go, penalty time!" And he didn't. I think it was maybe 3 separate instances. He didn't give a single one.
I think
to Hartford.
There was one that maybe could have gone their way, but I think because they were kind of trying to game the system there, I think he kind of just waved it off. So they kind of shot themselves in the foot there, I think.
Yeah. And then, this is obviously a trick question, but if I was to ask you, listeners that are still paying attention, same question to you, Jason, who has more goals this season, Hartford Athletic or Nick Markanich by himself?
I think you want to ask that question if it wasn't Nick Markanich.
He has 22 now? 21?
21, 22.
I don't remember. I just know he's in the 20s, and I know that Hartford Athletic has 19. So there's your answer. But let's talk about the goals that we scored, not what Charleston Battery is up to. And I want to talk about, can we just talk about trick plays? Can we talk about trick plays in soccer? Because, man, trick plays, set pieces, a perfect union here in the beautiful game. We've already seen Clay's indirect free kick earlier this year, which I don't even know how you plan to practice that in a training session. Like, hey guys, on the off chance we get an indirect free kick in the, inside the 18-yard box, what are you going to do?
You get an intern to just keep tossing soccer balls to you while you practice.
Sure. But this first goal that opened up the night, wow, another trick play. And the fact that it was against Hartford, it just felt like it added an extra layer of disrespect on top of everything against these, quote unquote New England rivals. When I was watching the play unfold, I kept scratching my head. We're sitting up there at the box, and the ref had marked it, and he didn't mark a lot of things on the night, but because it was so danger close to the goal, he marks the spot, walks the 10 paces, marks the line for the Hartford defenders, and then goes over to get in position. All of the other players, both teams, they're also trying to get in position, but as soon as he marked the spot, Clay just like grabs the ball. And like normally when you see a player you do that mechanic, they kind of grab it and then like spin it forward to like gain some room. So I thought he was going to try to like game the system and like try to just get a couple of inches, like a foot, or just to mess with Hartford, maybe make the ref work for it a little bit more. But he just sits there and holds it like it's a grocery
baby.
bag, a little baby, yeah. And you've got Jokes Quizera, which oh man, that's a story that writes itself. I'll talk about that in a second. But you got Jokes Quizera, who's just stopped off to the side, and they're just casual. Like there's no language that says, you can't really tell. They're not talking to each other. It's dead silent. Ref blows the whistle, and like Clay slowly and deliberately starts to put the ball down, like he's getting ready for this big wind-up shot, like a PK positioning, all that stuff. Like he's gonna measure his 2 steps back and then rifle a shot. And the second and again, it's going at like 0.5 speed. The second he puts the ball down, Quizera's already 2 steps through it running and just kicks it. Outside curl, right to Grant Stoneman and in. And like I can tell you right now, nobody was ready for it. Everyone thought it was Clay. Some people probably didn't even see Jojea off to the side. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like how do you guys like know how I don't see that in the regular game. That does not happen a lot. At most you'll see like short corner takes, quick little flicks, but like you don't see that kind of level of tomfoolery in professional soccer today, and I'm there for it. I loved it.
Yeah, to a certain extent, maybe the high level game has gotten a little too data driven, so we get too obsessed with some nonsense. Where I mean, it's important, but sometimes just go out there and have some fun. Yeah. Try some trick plays.
And it worked. It paid dividends on the night. And for those of you asking, why did Matt say Jokes Quizera twice? If you go and read on Hartford Athletic's news communication for their own press release of the events of the game, and someone on Twitter posted it. It didn't get any traction. I wasn't going to amplify it because I didn't even know if it was real at first. And then later I looked at the website. It's absolutely true. They literally wrote Jojea Quizera as Jokes Quizera on their communication.
Autocorrect failed them
big time, and they didn't proofread it. So I'm kind of now thinking like
that's his nickname.
The joke's on them, but do we make that the nickname? I don't know. We'll figure that out. We don't have to make everyone have a nickname, but Jokes from the Jokes Quizera. More important than that goal though, because we're going to talk about a little bit other stuff that happened with the goals, but I really want to focus on the most important thing that coach addressed on the night, and that was the clean sheet. So walk us through the clean sheet. Walk us through like what your take on it was and how important this actually was.
Yeah, first clean sheet in 6 matches. As this team has gotten better and grown, if they really want to take it to that next level, as they say, as we are heading into the playoffs and potentially looking at trying to get ourselves a home playoff berth spot, you can't go 6 matches without a clean sheet. Unless you're free scoring as like Charleston and Louisville, where you're just like, I'll just score 5 or 6. What are you going to do about it? You really need to kind of shut out your opponents from time to time. And as the team has grown and you kind of take that learning into the playoffs, you don't want it to get into a shooting match with some of these big boys in the playoffs.
Right. And, it was really interesting in the post-game presser. Coach emphasized that this was the bigger feat on the night. He even went on to say, we score goals all the time now. Like that problem has been solved. But the defense and clean sheets specifically are a rarer thing to find within this organization. And, I knew, and Coach alluded to it too, that the last time they had one 6 games ago was against El Paso. And like rightfully, yeah, you should be kind of putting the basement teams away in a clean sheet performance. Like we look at Miami and they scored 2 on us on that night, right? So like that was kind of a big deal. But then more specifically, I went back and looked, and if you don't count the scoreless draws, which you shouldn't, because you didn't earn enough.
Yeah, those didn't feel great.
That's the only 2 that we have on the season. So like it was a monumental effort for them to get that across the finish line, especially against your Derby rival. And it just spoke volumes on the night to what Kano was seeing and how impressed and pleased he was. Koke, when he came to do the interview, He was ecstatic. I mean, he answered all the questions in English and Spanish. He just continued to call it such a special night, not just because of the derby. His family was out, and they're from Spain, so they don't. It's not like they come out to a bunch of games. So it was even more important, and they have their child on the way. So it's just like it was a happy ending story for that and for the entire Vegas family, and you can't
love
ask
to
for a
see
better
it.
experience. Yeah. So let's get on to these other two goals, and then let's kind of wrap things up here. So Air Frank makes his return as Air Frank only does. So walk us through what you saw on Air Frank.
Yeah, so kind of a theme of the match, air superiority. Um, Frank is our second highest scorer on the season with 5. Like we mentioned when we were talking about Jojea, the team has worked on set pieces and it's paying dividends in terms of goal scoring.
Yeah, when we talked last week and did the preview of the game, we had mentioned that this game was going to be won or lost in the air. As both Frank and Stoneman both proved how vital that statement would be. While Frank does take second place in scoring now, I think it's also important to look at the pass that came from one Noah Fuson as he now leads the team in assists at 6.
He also has 4 goals, so I think he's our first player to 10 goal contributions.
He's our first 10-player goal contribution, correct. And so without Mark Ibarra on the field, someone found a way to feed the aerial beast that is Air Frank. The one thing I want to kind of just comment on real quick, though, and it was surprising because, when I saw it, I was like, okay, this does make sense. Hartford actually was better in the sky than we were on the night. They actually won more of the aerial duels at almost 60% to our 42. And
I think it's their Fort Dieng, right?
correct.
That guy is a monster.
Correct.
So I mean, he was probably winning any sort of challenge he went into.
Right. And so it's just important to kind of call out. We're going to quickly just go over like the importance that is our dear friend Air Frank. And if you look on the screen here, it's just fascinating to me. He continues to shine. And of course, yeah, we can talk about his 5 goals that occurred all through headers, by the way. But he's also in the top 10% of all of the offensive metrics in the league as a defender, right? He's also in the top 20% for his defensive actions, meaning that, you're getting contributions out of him in set pieces, in corner kicks, and sometimes he just comes up. Like I remember the Colorado goal, he just right time, right place. But like he's also winning his tackles, 71.4% tackle rate, 62.7% dual win rate. Like we always like to talk that Yao's going to stop anything, but Frank does a lot of the dirty work to kind of position himself and track back. And he has more speed, I think, than just about anyone else. So like, I don't know what his contract is, and we'll talk about that probably a little bit closer to the end of the season. But like Frank needs to be put on a 3-year contract.
Sign him up right now.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Yeah, if we lose him, make sure that someone's paying us generously for him.
So I want to talk about the other big controversy on the day. That wasn't donuts, it wasn't fireworks. It was a confusion of starting midfielders. So I think it was a surprise to me. I think it was a surprise to you. I know it was a surprise to me. I think it was a surprise to you that we saw Harivo get the start over Mark Ibarra. We got the stats up on the screen here for those of you that are following along. We'll kind of highlight the key differences here, but I wanted to ask you, is this more, are we going to see more of Harivo now because of this result, or do the stats indicate that something maybe isn't quite there and that it's really going to be right time, right moment for which weapon Coach Kano wants to bring to the table?
I'm not sure yet. I'm curious to see going forward, like who's going to get the start. Looking at these stats, I feel like Harivo has like leans a little bit more to like an attacking minded holding midfielder, where Ibarra is a little more kind of safe and possession oriented. So maybe that will be up to the match and how the game's flowing and kind of on the night how coach wants the game to go. But I think it's still too soon to tell. But it does look like this has been something that he's been working on. As we mentioned earlier, he's been progressively getting more and more minutes.
Yeah, I would say that maybe Harivo plays a cleaner game, but like you said, it's probably, and for the record, these stats are not inflated. We took a sample size. Ibarra has considerably more playing time, so we took a sample size and matched it to what Harivo's contributed in terms of minutes, not in terms of total play time. So when you look at this, like Harivo, like you said, he's got more shots because it's expanded to his goals that he's had, which is like a record that's never happened before for him. But like in his tackle rates, his dribbles, and like you said, he seems to be a player willing to move into dangerous positions within the field and take the ball a little bit further. Whereas Ibarra is someone who wants to help contain the shape and then redistribute the ball and try to unlock opportunities where he can. He is one of their like weapons when it comes to set piece taking and corner kicks, which has influenced some of Ibarra's numbers. But I think these are two different players that you're playing with. So like kind of like last week, if you remember, we compared Clay Holstead's game to what we had seen with Connor McGlynn in the Indy game. I think you're going to see more of that, but these players are closer in the margins when it comes to their effectiveness on the field. I agree with you. They both offer different or unique skill sets that bring different dimensions to the game. I think this is going to be the most difficult thing to predict. So for those of you playing the card collector app, I think it's going to really kind of be the order of the day on like what is Kano prioritizing? Is he prioritizing defense? Is he prioritizing like going for the jugular right out the bat? I don't think that there's a clear line of sight other than if like Kano just really wants to see Haribo thrive. I feel like this is not something that's going to be sorted out in the next few games. Like this could take the rest of the season to understand which one of these players like maintains their starting 11 role.
It's funny, in my head, I have this kind of idea of who these two players are, and I have it completely swapped. So Mark is only 25, Haribo's 28, whereas in my mind, Mark Ibarra is this like grizzled veteran of the league who he's like this, this player who's been there for a long time, dependable, reliable. Whereas I think of Haribo as this new up and coming, like I have them completely swapped because Haribo is already over 100 appearances in the USL. This is like, I think Mark's third season.
Yeah. And then, so speaking of goals, we got to talk about the man, the myth, the legend, Joe Brito, the most hated man in Hartford, the most loved man who's hated by Hartford. Wow, what an incredible goal. Chico runs up to the out of touch line, just feeds it in to the screaming in Joe Brito. He puts it into the back of the net. Chico triples his assist production from last year now with 3 assists. Joe gets his second goal of the season. And then you just see him celebrate the goal right in front of the Hartford Athletic supporter group. We asked him after the game, what does it feel like to be the most hated man in Hartford? And all he responded with after he chuckled was, it feels good. It feels good, everyone. He did go on to say that he really appreciates the city of Hartford and like everything that they did for him. But it felt really good in the moment to score that goal against your Derby rivals. We don't have time to unpack the rest of it. I just wanted to just kind of throw out there that he did score as a substitute. So now we're leading that column. You'll never have that Louisville or Charleston. But it's also the 10th goal we've scored in the last 15 minutes of a game. So again, stoppage time goal. We just continue to be able to show that we can kind of score all over the range, but we kind of get really dangerous when the game's kind of wrapping up. So I do you have any like quick statement on that?
Yeah, I mean, he's looked better recently, right, as a substitution. I alluded to kind of earlier, but we asked Kaler in the past about him. It just seems that maybe his position is a bit redundant because he wants to take up some of the same spaces that JJ does, or if you push him out wide, he's basically in the same occupying same space as wingbacks. So I think unfortunately he's probably just going to see kind of that rotation minutes at the point. But if he continues to play the way he has, like, I mean, I think we'd all be happy to see that.
I agree. We'll see what his role becomes as the season continues. I mean, we only have a few games left. We're on the back half of the season now, so we'll see what he does. But I want to get into the most important thing of the night. We saved it for the end here. At the end of the game, we asked Clay Holstead got his 8th yellow card. He should have been facing suspension. We asked coach, and he said he didn't actually even know in the moment. So we went and made a request to the league of like, what is the official status? Earlier this week, we saw from the Disco committee that like the players that were either suspended due to yellow card accumulation or the ones that were on 1 card warning, and Clay's name was completely absent from the list. So Jason, we know if you go and count all of the individual yellow cards that he's accumulated, that he has 8 yellow cards. But what if I told you that's not correct? Then he does not have 8 yellow cards, but he has 5 yellow cards. How do you do that math?
I don't know, USL math.
USL math is the best math. So for those of you following along on the screen, we finally were given the league rules around discipline and yellow cards, and we're just going to kind of read that out and then kind of walk through how this has worked so far. So a player will automatically reduce his yellow card accumulation by 1 yellow card each time he can appear in 3 consecutive league matches without a card or supplemental discipline being applied. This can happen a maximum of 4 times a season. We also know there's some dollar amounts that get attached to each kind of way. We won't bring that up tonight, but it's like hundreds of dollars. It's nothing crazy. So if you're looking on the screen, this is all of Clay's yellow card accumulation, and this is going to explain why he's only at 5 yellow cards. So he got his first 5 yellow cards in his first 7 performances: one against New Mexico United, Charleston Battery, Pittsburgh Riverhounds, Phoenix Rising, and then North Carolina FC. Then he was a good boy for a bit, and he had 5 games where he didn't have any disciplinary actions. So he kind of got an Uno reverse card, which is what's on the image there at the Louisville game. And that took his 5 yellow card count down to 4. However, in Memphis, he got his 5th yellow card again. And then he had 3 games again of good behavior, dropping him to 4. He went on to play Miami FC, where he got his 5th yellow card again. And then he had 3 games with a good behavior, rescinding that 5th card back down to 4 at Detroit City, where he then earned his, and this is no joke, he earned his 4th, 5th red or yellow card. I can't even say that. It just doesn't feel right to say it. He earned his 4th, 5th yellow card against Hartford Athletic this weekend past. So he's back to 5. He can get one more reduction, and then he will eventually hit that window. But I'm curious, league mechanics, do you think this is appropriate for this league to have? I don't know that I've seen any. Like, I've seen one. You can get like one good grace, but I've never seen it to this extent. Is this appropriate for the game, or should, based on his discipline troubles, should he have to sit out a game at some point earlier than what he's got now?
I mean, soccer is a physical game. Fouling is part of the game. You know, I think this is an interesting rule. Maybe there's some cons to it that I'm not thinking of right now. But I mean, if it helps keep your best players on and they can kind of control themselves and not, you know, go out there and butcher people, I'm fine with it.
Okay. So for those of you guys who are wondering why Clay Holstead will play potentially in this upcoming weekend's game against the Roots, it's because he's only on his 5th yellow card for the 4th time. All right, let's get into this recap. Talk to us about table standings. Where are we at? What's RIFC up to? What do we need to know?
All right, so we now have a 7-11-5 record with 32 points. Clean sheet helps with the goal difference as well. It brings that up to +4. If we take a look around our rivals, like I'd mentioned, there's a very tight point spread. At this point, I think we're just going to retire Hartford. They are now 10 points behind us.
In the coffin, baby.
So unless some sort of crazy miracle happens, I do not see them, you know, fighting for a playoff spot. Birmingham Legion is currently 3 points ahead, hosting Detroit City this Friday evening, which would be tonight if you're listening to this tomorrow. Detroit has a game in hand on us, and I think they're pretty close to us in terms of point. I don't have it off the top of my head
right
here.
Us.
Right behind us. Okay, so with that in mind, I think a draw there would probably be best for us. Because then if not, Birmingham would get further away from us, or we don't want Detroit to jump us, you know. So like a nice old draw with red cards on both sides. What else is going on here? We do play the Legion at the end of the month too. So if that gap can kind of stay close, we have that potential to either close that gap or jump them if results go our way. Loudoun and North Carolina aren't too far behind us, 2 and 3 points respectively. Loudoun is away to the Rowdies. That should be tough. And then North Carolina is away to San Antonio FC, who's not been great, but the way this league is, you kind of always slightly favor the home team.
Yeah, you know, you hate to see it because you can look at now at the table, Indy 11's 4th place still, but they're only 3 points ahead. They took those 3 points from us. It really would have been fun to now kind of have that win. And I know that fans are probably questioning, like, man, we really kind of should have put that in the bag. But let's move on to Oakland. Oakland, 23 matches played, 11-2 record. It seems like they're kind of an all or nothing team themselves. Only 2 draws, so complete inversion from our Draw Kings special. They have a -7 goal difference, though, which is weird being in 4th place in the league to have a -7 goal differential. That is partly due to the thrumping I think I just made up a word there, that Pittsburgh and Sacramento gave them in 5-goal losses in consecutive fixtures. So that is never a good thing to have in their recent last 5 games, to have over 10 goals conceded in that period of time. As we kind of get into this game ahead, the only question that I really want to ask you is, are we going to go to the Roots next season? Because that'll be an away leg since they're coming here, so that we can watch a game in the Coliseum. And as a fan of soccer, are you okay with the price tag that they're renting that facility for $3 million annually? Woof.
That sounds like a lot. I don't know what ticket sales wise would be. I think they can. Their current stadium caps out at like 15,000, right?
No, I think that's their projection for the new Malibu one that they want to build.
It's at least
15,000 is what they think they will fill in the Coliseum. So I think it's
they're
less.
at least getting around 10.
No. I think only like 3 teams are at 10, and that's like New Mexico, Lynn Stadium with Louisville, and I want to say
I have this information secondhand, so maybe maybe they are wrong. But I mean, that gives them a lot of potential. Maybe, I don't know where their current stadium is, so maybe if this is in a better location, because location is very important, as you know, the Revs may know, to help getting people to stadiums. But I mean, hey, we can show up and we can go to a thrift store and buy some athletic jerseys and be confused as to what's going on here.
I'm all about it. Let's get into the injury report here. I'm not going to say it again for the rest of the season, just because there's no point in continuing to say it. Isaac Anking will now be out for the rest of the season, so there is that to deal with. Amos Shapiro-Thompson, he continues. Coach said he's getting closer and closer.
They released, I think, pictures of him.
There's pictures of him on Instagram today, so that's always a good set. Kofi Chumesi, he was listed again as injured, but he's not injured, so I don't know what's going on there. But that's what's going on. Let's get into this formation. I think this isn't really difficult to figure out, but you tell me, Jason. We've got this up on the screen here. Does this sound right? And let's tell listeners, audio only, who we got.
Yeah, I think this is probably what we're going to see. We'll obviously see Vegas and net with Nodarse, Yao, and Stoneman in the back 3, as we don't think Dugan's may be ready, with a midfield 5 of Quezera, Harivo, Fuson, Holstad, and Turnbull. And then up top, I think we'll see Williams return with Chico.
Yeah, I think Harivo's the only one where I'm not 100% on it.
Yeah, I also at the same time wouldn't be surprised to see Ibarra, and then you just kind of rotate their minutes there. Even maybe giving Holstad some rest too.
Oh, no. Holstad stays on. Holstad's a permanent fixture. Listen, I mean, Harifo to Ibarra, it's depth. And like we were talking about Anking before, I'm totally fine with having Ibarra as depth, and I'm totally fine with Ibarra starting, because that means that we get Harivo as depth then instead. So it'll be interesting to understand.
Good problems to have.
It's a great problem to have. Exactly. On the Oakland side of things here, kind of starting things up, this is a little bit interesting. And we'll talk about Paul Blanchett in a second, because you learned some things. And so in the initial build that we had for this, now they've played a 4-2-3-1 for a majority of the season. But after getting pantsed as thoroughly as they had recently, it looked like they were trying to mix things up. They tried a 3-4-3 to some success, and then they most recently tried a 5-4-1 that they saw a lot of promise in against a very competent Loudoun United. So I'm going with the fact that they may just continue to ride this 5-4-1 for a couple of different reasons we'll unpack as we preview the team. But I've got Paul Blanchett in net for now, and you'll tell me if that's wrong. Memo Diaz and this name is my favorite name of all time. And all the broadcasters, by the way, they just call him Gaji, because then no one wants to take a crack at his last name. But it's Marg Velashvili. I already messed it up. Marg Velashvili. So that's a fun one. Say that 5,000 times.
Gotta love those Georgian names.
Neilville Hackshaw, Neil Logue, Justin Rasmussen are going to be your back 5. And then in your midfield, you're going to have Lindo Metheka, Camden Riley, Daniel Gomez, and Babukar Najai. And it's Najai. It's not Neji, for those of you that tried to tell me otherwise. And then you've got Johnny Rodriguez, who is just on an absolute tear. We're going to talk about him in a second. I think this is going to be the formation. You may have a little bit of a difference of opinions on that, but let's get into this, and then we'll talk about Blanchett towards the end. And what I want to talk about specifically is just the game style of what we're going to see on this Oakland game. It's really fascinating to try to unpack this team. Like you said, it's kind of like feast or famine, all or nothing. This team has some interesting dynamics to it where, one, they love intercepting the ball. They lead the league by a wide margin in interceptions this season. And it shows in whether they're in their back four or their back five now that they've adopted, where this team seems to be compact at both ends and like almost taunts teams to try to figure out how to get past either their high press or penetrate their low block defense that they've applied. That doesn't mean that there's just like this vacancy or like no man's land, but the way that they move their shape, it's not like the whole team moves forward or the whole team drops back. They almost kind of like tear at the middle a little bit. And while it does create gaps in the formation, it's created a lot of turnovers in their favor, whether due to interception or just bad passing in general, that allows the Oakland Roots to be a complete transition team. So much like us, they are complete just chaos where they want to catch you in the midfield. They don't want to play out the back, and they want to use their tactic on the day, which is find a speedy winger, find a speedy wing back, get the ball up the field, and then get a cross in to find Johnny Rodriguez, who is like hotter than hot right now. And I'm only talking in his goal production, but he's also a very good looking man. and that's how they're doing it. Like it's very simple. And so we'll talk kind of what needs to happen here. Where the liability comes, I think, especially for this game, is going to be, especially in watching the last two games and watching tape, it's really going to be in this goalkeeper situation, because right now they've been playing Cyril in the net for Blanchett, and he's definitely a lower caliber than Pauly is in that goal position. He's not immune to like doing some chaos moves of like coming out when he shouldn't, making some blunders in his distribution, and some of his deflections are really poor, where like instead of like punching it out, he kind of like brings it back right into like the midfield for potential liability. He's definitely been on his responsible side of contributing to goals against for the squad. So I kind of want to ask you, you learned some things very late here about Blanchett, and maybe unpack for us, why is it that we may not see Blanchett on the night for the game against Rhode Island?
Yeah, so Blanchett actually did not play against Loudoun in their most recent game. Because him and his family just welcomed a newborn into the world.
You guys all thought it was going to be bad news, and it's joyous news.
So I don't know the status of his paternity leave, if he will be available for selection on Saturday. So we'll just kind of have to keep an eye on that.
You know, it's such a weird thing too, because like we're not going to talk about the politics of American maternity leave versus the rest of the world, but like when you're a professional player, like you have to have protections to be able to take whatever the warranted time off that everyone else benefits from. But you also need to like be able to build your brand and continue to showcase your skills to get the next year's contract or the next year's. I wonder how many players in the history of the game have been like, I'm dad first now, and I will see you guys in 30 to 90 business days.
I usually think that they don't miss too much time. Soccer teams really rely on their community a lot. So if you were to hear them deny, paternity, like at least a match to miss to welcome the birth of their child, I don't think that would go over very well with fans. They'd say, hey, we'll take our backup goalkeeper for one game.
So the birth, I know, and you've heard those stories, especially like derbies, where like the players aren't available for selection because they're there for those incredible moments. But like I'm talking like child's born, and you're allowed like 3 months. Do you take it, or do you go, you know what, I really want to keep my job next year, and I don't want to be replaced by the backup of my role, my understudy?
It's not exactly the same. We won't go too far into this topic, but
we don't want to become a maternity politics podcast.
No, who did we play earlier? Also, was it Sacramento, where one of their players, their son had a disease, and he took off a few weeks to.
You're bringing this down.
Yeah, I just mean like it's not unheard of to see players.
That is a completely different thing. You're talking illness. Yeah, you're talking illness and trials and tribulation versus the joy of a child who maybe just needs a little bit of attention. How dare you? Moving on. I don't want to go there.
It all ended up well, if I remember correctly.
It did, but still. All right. So getting back to this, Cyril, like we said, he's going to cause some self-inflicted wounds if he's in goal for Oakland Roots. And he's probably the Achilles heel of this squad right now in terms of what I would call entirety for its composure. I can definitely see something spilling our way when the Roots probably did everything else right in a particular play or something of that matter. So that's going to be a key thing to watch. What's really interesting about the Oakland Roots, though, too, besides the fact that they don't play in Oakland, which I'm getting all these comments, I appreciate the attendance. I'm going to put it up. Matt Hands has this 4,000 is the potential attendance, but they do want to have 15,000 in the Coliseum next year. So that
Okay,
is
that's
where it
probably
is.
what
Mhm.
I heard. I just got it mixed up.
So I want to talk about how this team's kind of a clone of us to a certain extent. And when I mean clone, I mean like Chinese knockoff, like wish.com version, because we're still the superior product. Um, there aren't many teams. I went and actually checked the comparison, at least in the Eastern Conference. I didn't do a lot of work on the Western Conference, but in some of our data feeds, we're allowed to take the analytics patterns and compare them to the performances of other squads and like do a match by match comparison. Oakland Roots really are like we talked about the mirror match earlier this year with North Carolina FC. They're not a mirror match, but they're very similar in all of their production numbers. So much so that the Roots are only within about 5% in every single category, except for the few that I'm going to talk about right now. So 5% variation positive for them or negative for us. I guess I said that backwards, but you understand what I'm saying for those of you following along. The only place where there's substantial deviation from this like tight model is RIFC has 12% higher increase in tackles and duels, but it comes at the cost of 13% more fouls. Um, in terms of like yellow cards rewarded by fouls, even though we are like dead even on fouls. So we're getting punished more often for the same reciprocation of how many fouls we are conceding. The only other thing that Oakland's really leading us on that's of like a wider margin is they're out getting fouled by 20%. And when I saw those stats and was like, okay, how do I track this? How do I make sense of this in the tape that I'm going to watch? It really became apparent where there is so much speed on the wings of this team. And Johnny Rodriguez is such a menace that like once he's a lone striker system. Lone strikers, they are either like amazing and can do incredible things with very little, or they need a lot of support. And this is a combination of both of those things. These outside backs, these wings can tuck in and get to Johnny to feed him whatever he needs, or Johnny can just take the ball and just book it down the way. And when you're a transition team, when you catch these groups coming at you and trying to get something past you, and then you catch them on the back foot, Johnny's off to the races every single time. So there's a lot of emergency fouling and emergency scramble defense that's happening against the Roots. And that's why you see this higher than normal percentage of fouls being rewarded to the Roots. But the Achilles heel of the entire system, if it's not Sorrell, the other part of it is this. Like, and this is where they really start to shine, just like Rhode Island FC. They're not a possession-based team. They don't want the ball just as much as we don't want the ball. And this is going to be that foil of like which team's strategy, which team's ethos on the night is going to win over and be supreme, because they would rather not have the ball and catch you in that transition. And every time they've tried to build build out of the back play and kind of move their pieces forward, the times that they get scored on, if it isn't just like a boneheaded thing on the back line, they're getting honestly beat because they overextend their players. And we've seen that happen to us a bunch of times as well, where we hold the ball, we try to build up, we lose the ball in a dangerous position, and then we get countered on. Like we don't really get scored a lot on traditional build-up play. So Oakland is looking very much like us when it comes to that kind of stuff. Did you see anything that kind of shouted out differently, or do you see the same things that I'm picking up on?
No, I agree. I think that they are a team that performs better without the ball. So that'll be interesting to see. I think that RFC is going to end up taking more of the ball in this match, especially because coach wants us to. I also think that as we've seen the performances get better on our side, we that solidity in the back, right? That we've seen like where Yao, Stoneman, and Nadarse kind of position wise are making sure to cover each other, and they've gotten really good at like cutting off those passing lanes and stopping those attacks from happening. So I think that we'll I think we'll do well against that.
So let's talk about the players to watch.
Yeah, so Johnny Rodriguez, he's got 10 goals and 3 assists this year. The former CSUN Matador man, he spent the last 4 years with the Roots. He's just finding his form this year, though. The first 2 years were kind of quiet. Last year, he had a decent production, but he's kind of caught fire this year. He's a decent passer. He puts in the shift on the defensive side of things as well, too. Very much a striker who is going to help and work for his team. With 4 goals and 1 assist in his last 3 matches, he could be dangerous. He could be putting our defenders to work this match.
He's the number one player to watch out for. And then also there's Camden Riley, another former SD Loyal player, and he is an attack from the back center back. So he's kind of been all over the place. If you saw in the formation, he's theoretically positioned to be in the midfield in this lineup. He's similar in the mold to Stoneman. I thought we were actually going to sign him. I was really hoping we would bring Camden Riley, but that's the ginger to ginger thing. He's got an ability to play a ball from the back line into promising areas, but he does suffer from a bit of inconsistent performances. But when he's on his game, he's going to be someone to watch out for. So you expect fireworks or expect him to kind of be a dud?
I think part of that is, like you showed, he's been kind of pushed into the midfield, but he's a center back by trade. So that'll be interesting to see his progression there. Another one to watch out here, Memo Diaz. 1 goal and 5 assists in 37 chances created from the right back position. This man is dangerous. He's a consistent performer for Oakland over the last 4 seasons who contributes to attack and defense.
Yeah, and then there's the one that everyone's asking, and that is Dom Dwyer, U.S. men's national team legend. I will talk about him, but he didn't dress for the last match, and he started the one prior and got subbed off early. I don't know if we'll see him. There has been no injury reported. He's a bit of an MLS great with his time around the league, most noticeably, though, at Sporting Kansas City. Hopefully we'll get a chance to see him, maybe. But, like, at the same time, I don't know that we will. I don't even know if he'll travel because it is the longest trip of the conferences. Not like longest, but like for Oakland, this is a long trip. And if there's one thing I know about former U.S. men's national team players, they don't like turf, especially if they're on the wrong side of 30. So, when we had talked about Isaac Anking's injury, I didn't expand on this, but one of the things we had heard that happened in his injury was that, like, his foot, it was contactless, right? But his foot got caught in the hot turf and stuck, which is what attributed to the tweak in the knee. So, like, every player we ever interview, every player I think in the world hates turf. If Dom Dwyer goes prima donna on this, he may not want to show up for the game. So I know there's a lot of fans that would like to see him. He has a history with the league, with the soccer system here, but I wouldn't be surprised if we also don't see him, because if you're not going to use him, and they have like 9 forwards on their roster, so that may not happen. I have a question for you, though. Who would you rather see at Burns Stadium this Saturday? Would you rather see Dom Dwyer in the fans or like getting autographs, or would you rather see Sydney Leroux? And yeah, I did it. I brought up old beef.
Oh man. She's gorgeous, but unless she can actually go out there and play for the Roots, it would be cool to see Dom Dwyer maybe get a few minutes.
No. You don't want Dom Dwyer there so that they have no additional weapons, and you just want to appreciate Sydney Leroux for her amazing soccer contribution that she's offered to the women's game.
I know she's a legend,
and she's also very attractive. But
I know, I'm just saying, like, it'd be cool to see him play for like 10 or 15 minutes.
Maybe warm up.
Yeah,
not play. All right, Jason, what are the key elements that Rhode Island FC has to get right to get the W here?
All right. So like we mentioned, similar to RIFC, Oakland tends to do better when they have less possession. So as we are theorizing, we are probably, RIFC is going to have the lion's share of possession. So I think it's important that they keep that press up and make sure that they kind of, push Oakland back into their own half. As well as making sure that they stay nice and compact and organized in the back to prevent against quick counterattacks. Because like we mentioned, they are number 1 in interceptions, so they look to then turn that quickly into attack.
Yeah, I mean, you saw the earlier stats. We need to score first to win, because when we do, then the minimum threshold is a draw. This team, if they play out the similar roster, is a defense first kind of team with that 5-4-1. So a lot of it's going to be on transition. A lot of it's going to be speed on the wings. With 2 counterattacking forces, like you said, Rhode Island FC needs to be basically allergic to the ball to play the game that they want to play. I think this game's going to be decided in the midfield in who can catch who in more transition opportunities and counters. The really big test for the team isn't the goal production again, but it's really going to be, can the back 3 lock down Johnny Rodriguez, because he's got speed. He likes to play central too, which if Yao's in the middle, like that's gonna be a problem. A lot of times Rodriguez, when he's created something from nothing, it's been by burning that back center back, the center back, if you will. So they're gonna have to figure out a way to lock him down. He scored 10 goals this season, and the next player on the Roots that's chasing him for second place is at 2 goals. So they've spread their goals out similar to Rhode Island FC, again, like a clone, but Johnny Rodriguez is like way ahead of the pack. So they have to figure out how to lock him down, and maybe a little bit of emphasis on Memo Diaz then as well. So that means Jokes Quizera is going to have his hands full on the night. I think really what's going to happen is RFC is going to have to create some chances from very few opportunities, and we'll figure out which team shakes out on the end of the night. Score predictions: 80% Fought Mob think Rhode Island FC is going to win, 10% Draw Kings, and 10% Oakland Roots. What do you got for the predictions? Oh no, it's my turn. It's my turn because it's my turn. Nice try. I almost gave you that. It's going to be a draw, 1-1. I have no science, no theory to back this up other than a superstition at this point. So if I have my expectations be lower, the team rises above, and I want that Draw Kings record broken. So selfish interest, I know they're going to do better, but I got 1-1.
I would also like to see that Draw King record broken. Oakland's only failed to score in one of the last 10 matches, so I think that they will get one. But I think this is one of those matches where home field advantage is key. So I think RFC is going to pull out with the 2-1 win.
Okay. The Hillside, the Quant, he would agree with you, and he thinks it's going to be 2-1 us as well. He noticed in some of his analytics that Oakland is a strong team, but they don't score as many goals when they aren't in the Pacific time zone.
Suffer from jet lag.
Maybe it's just they're more. Some teams are just better at home. That happens too. But he was right to call out when they're in the Western, specifically Pacific time zone. That is what you see. I do want to kind of give some props out to the Quant here, the Hillside. As you can see right now, going into the Oakland game, he has gotten 3 of the last 4 predictions correct. Now on here, he has it as a draw, but he has gone and since recanted that for the win. He's got the faith now, and it's the hope that will kill you. What's really interesting is for me is when you look at that first table, the home field advantage, which has the highest point spread possible, that one has been completely accurate so far in its consistency. So like, I'm fine if that table's correct too, but all of these do indicate that this potentially is a draw. So take from that what you want. If you're making bets, this may be a tough one to kind of get through on the night, but let's wrap things up. Let's get through these questions lightning fast. So I'm going to start and then you can read the next one. Okay. So Tim writes in, a recent article stated that Tidewater could be converted into an ice rink during the winter months. Does that mean an annual Defiance on Ice field trip needs to become an off-season tradition?
I don't know how to ice skate, but I can learn.
I mean, you know how to put back 3 all the way. So that's the first tradition. Everything else is, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. All right. What's the next question?
All right. Matt J here wants to know if the USO called and said you are scheduling the first home game at Tidewater to be aired on CBS, who would you choose and why?
So I'm assuming it's not the first game of the year. It's just the first CBS game. I want Detroit back. I want revenge. I want Detroit back next year, and I want to punish them. But I think because we'll always show up the best, it probably should be the Derby. You need to televise the Derby. So I'm fine with either. Derby's the better one, but there's a revenge side that I want. Jerica writes in, what was the most unexpected or surprising thing about the Hartford match? It can be gameplay, it can be the stadium atmosphere, logistics, whatever. What do you got?
I guess the fireworks, but also I kind of expected a little more fight out of Hartford outside of the first few minutes where they looked to kind of, go on the attack against us. They didn't really have a good showing on the night.
I'm going to jump in just as a surprise. The Coke, I keep saying the Coke Vegas, the lavender kits.
Oh, that
was fantastic. And they sold out. They're already gone. I thought there would be more. They're completely gone. And then also that the $10 Beat Hartford t-shirts, like talk about a way to like stick it to your rivals, right? Yeah, 100%. So I'm going to go with the merch. And then maybe the surprise that someone risked their weekend by going to jail. Because that Hartford fan did not, like, he spent the weekend there. You have to get cleared by a judge, I think, or I mean, it's been a while since I've dealt with the prison systems, but I'm pretty sure like when you get thrown in the slammer on the weekend, it's till Monday morning. So I guess it was worth it. But I love soccer too much to ever throw my weekend, my life being banned from soccer. Like I would never do that. So whatever. Anyways, and then here's another question here.
Leo wants to know, how deep is Kano's involvement in player transfer / loans?
It's a good question. He's intimately into the roots of it because one, he's not just the head coach, but he's also the general manager. We've been told that he partners directly with one Sean Carey. Those two are kind of the think tank stratagem, if you will, behind a lot of the player acquisitions and player selections. We talked last week that Sean Carey's also has a very deep history with the youth systems, collegiate systems, and professional leagues here in New England. So they are kind of like the duo not to be trifled with. So a lot of it goes there. When we asked about the Dugan loan, that whole recall thing, I had asked Coach about Jack P, and he said a lot of stuff, interesting stuff off the record that I can't share. But like, I think that those kinds of mechanics of like how he wants to build, how he wants to play, if there's a loan opportunity to go out there, he's always looking, right? Coach's favorite saying is roster's never done. But yeah, I would say he's very much invested in that. And we kind of saw that with the Sadie transfer, like trading a player before the halfway break of your inaugural season. He knew there was an upgrade that he wanted out there to fill a gap that we didn't see. And he made the right he made the transaction of choice that he wanted to see happen there. And then final question, of course it was going to happen. Donut Gate. Robert asks, Jason, what's your favorite donut?
Oh man. My favorite donut? I don't know if I have a good answer for this. I love all donuts. Maybe not all of them. There's some that aren't great. I really do enjoy like a good glazed with chocolate and sprinkles on top. That's a good one.
I love that you're putting so much up. Like you've talked faster about other things and you're like really digesting here the key to your donut ways. So we're just going to go with that.
When you start to talk about food and me ranking food, that's a completely different thing. We're not talking soccer here. This is, I need some more time. I need to get my tier list out, maybe when we do
this is why we don't do podcasts over an hour
pod,
30. All right. Let's wrap this up. What do we got for events coming up?
So your Rhode Island FC takes on the Oakland Roots this Saturday, August 17th, with kickoff at 7:30 p.m. If you can't make it to Burns Stadium, the game will be broadcast on NESN Plus and ESPN Plus.
And then RIFC travels down to face the unfaced opponent, one Loudoun United, in their first matchup on Saturday, August 24th at 7:30 p.m. It is crazy that we're towards the end of the season and we have opponents in our conference that we have not yet squared off against. You can watch that game on ESPN Plus, or you can come to the Guild where the Defiants will be enforced at their watch party. And if you're out in Newport, the club will actually be at the official RIFC watch party at Newport Craft Brewing. Always a great place, always a great time. So if you find yourself down that way, make sure that you go and say hi to Chip and any other surprises that they have there. Listen, it's always fun, even if when we go long like this. Maybe the listeners have to times 2 the speed here. So
it was a post Derby pod.
Yeah, so we knew it was going to go long, 100%. I just want to say, for those of you who continue to follow us, continue to listen, continue to support, thank you so much. We would ask that you check all of our different socials and don't forget to rate us, subscribe, follow us wherever that is. It's weird to always see the numbers, like we're really high in some of them and then like non-existent in others. So we have all of the different mediums. And if you feel so inclined, please feel free to do so. Your support helps us continue to grow and reach new audiences. The algorithm, we feed the algorithm feeds us. So just want to thank you guys all for your support and having such a good time last week against Hartford in the second coming of El Clamico. So, and we named it, by the way, it's El Clamico. I don't think we started with that. It is El Clamico. That's how this runs. We run New England now, not Duncan, not Hartford. We run it. So Jason, any final thoughts?
Yep. Thank you everyone for your support. We really appreciate you. So let's just wrap it up and get out of here. So make sure to check out our friends over at the Blazing Musket. And that is at theblazingmusket.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Threads, and TikTok at RIFC Podcast. We have an Instagram at Raising Anchor, and we have a website, www.raisinganchorpodcast.com.
Anchor's up, buddy. Let's go get this draw/win/something this weekend.
Anchor's up.